Thanks, Ken. Microphone's working? I just have to do a couple of housekeeping things here to start. My lawyers tell me I have to do this. Given that there are lay people in the audience, it's a matter of personal protection. It will only take a second. And rest assured, it's just a disclaimer my lawyer says I have to give before every speech I give. And I think it's important for this one. It answers a lot of questions before they get asked. Okay, now as I try to reassemble my audio, we'll get back to it. So I'd like to thank Ken for his invitation to speak here and his gracious hospitality and that of the IHMC on my first visit to Pensacola. And when I learned the history of this business, I got a little nervous about being called a serial anything. As I recall someone else who was serial in another dimension who had a hopefully different experience, although, and that's, I hope if things go better for me than they did for him. So I've got a couple more disclaimers. I've been up since midnight because I'm the world's best procrastinator. And the internet is the best single device ever created to enhance procrastination. So I'm pretty tired and I might forget things, and if I do, call them out. For example, if I start using vowels, for example, just let me know. It can be very confusing. So this is all about how today's technology makes us feel stupid, and it's driven really very strongly by my own experience that if I find something hard to do, and I like figuring things out, I like puzzles, and I like technical puzzles, but if it's hard for me, it must be impossible for you. And that's not a comment of about intelligence. It's a comment about my perverse sense of enjoyment. I find pleasure in making things work up to a point. And it just makes me a little bit crazy that, when you buy a new TV, basically, this is the first thing they want to tell you, is the 9,000 different ways this TV is going to kill you if you don't do exactly the right thing. I mean, think about it. It's the most important thing. The thing you open, you just spent your $3,000 on this flat screen. What they want to tell you is that this thing may kill you, and you better know its serial number or, God forbid the police come and get you. There's also, of course, I have a disclaimer that I have to tell you that the state of California has determined that this lecture may cause boredom in certain individuals, and disclosure of that fact will result in imprisonment, not to exceed a long time, but still inconvenient. Now, the last thing I want to do before I get on with the substance of the presentation is that I want to just talk a little bit about the bio that Ken gave, because some of you may have been lured in by false pretenses on that bio. On the internet, you can sort of be anything, and this is the filmmaker that I am on the internet. This is my movie. It's The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. It's a very scientific movie discussing the resurrection of a skeleton who returns to rule the world through his maniacal control of the rare element atmospherium. Believe it or not, I recommend it highly. But believe it or not, it was picked up by Sony Pictures. But many of you probably don't know that. From my other major film role, which was as the special thanks in section of the making of the Monkeys made-for-TV documentary. So. But if either of those, if anybody feels misled by the promotion for the talk, I will refund your money 10 times over. Okay. I'm also an explorer. You can see me here exploring the sky. Some of you may notice. I am a pilot, although for 6 months after this this picture was taken, the FAA wouldn't let me fly. Okay, so I grew up with strange questions like, why is it important to break glass when things are on fire? I mean, is there something about broken glass that's going to help you in a fire, or Is there a magical property of glass that puts out fires? I kind of knew what they were saying, but it was, why don't they just tell you? In case of fire, put it out, Part of putting it out is breaking the glass. So I started to think about how instructions and message are conveyed to people even at a very young age. And I will now show you me at a very young age. Okay, there I am, programming away in 1979 on my Altair computer that I built as a high school science project in my basement in 1975. And then I went into the workforce at 1979 because I realized if I went to school, they were going to teach me Fortran on punch cards. And I had just built something in my basement that was 10 times more powerful than what the school had. And I figured this is where the action was, so I think I better stay there. The other picture here to the right is I just put up because I just happened to find this picture. There, of course, is the legendary ASR 33 teletypewriter, which was the standard for input-output to computers for so long. But standing behind it is Al Pepin. And Al Pepin was a technician at Honeywell Corporation who actually was the technician who built the first ever prototype at Honeywell of a computer terminal that displayed not on paper but on a video screen. But seriously, folks, this is what my career really looks like. I used to fix machines, weather machines for $4.08 an hour way back then, and then moving up, my hair got grayer and I went for Google and they paid me a little more than $4.08 an hour. Minimum wage had gone up in the meantime. And done a lot of other things in between, including starting a bunch of businesses for Idea Lab. So I am a serial entrepreneur, which means I stay with a business. It's like serial monogamy, being with somebody until you can no longer, being with somebody faithfully until you can no longer stand it anymore. So serial entrepreneurship is being with a company until you feel like it's not fun anymore, which usually happens around 40 employees and people want to talk about pay raises and things like that. So I like really early stage businesses, and I've gotten old enough and dumb enough to just focus on that. So the first act of my presentation to you is going to be called It's Not You. It's not you. Just be reassured. What is happening is not because of you. But to understand why it's not you, we have to understand sort of how we came to this place and how absolutely broken it is. I mean, we could all have a group therapy session. We could talk about this together. But I want to make sure you leave this part of it going, it's not me. I'll tell you about a 9-year-old kid who has an experience with technology you won't believe. But I'll take you back to the good old days. What are the good old days? So this is the instruction manual. I'll tell you, these were the good old days. Well, first, on one dimension, and it also required an oscilloscope to get the machine to start working in the first place. So I guess the usability and the memorization of a certain number of manually entered key switch patterns to get the machine to start up. But in any case, you get your manual, you load up your programming language on a cassette tape. But the best part is you open that manual up and it says, if any problems with our encounter, feel free to call us at this number. The software department is at extension 3. And the authors of the Basic Interpreter, Bill Gates, Paul Allen, and Monty Davidoff will be glad to assist you. Now, 30 years later, the only question I have is, who is Monty Davidoff? And my advice would be, don't follow his stock picks. He's the guy in the back going, you're just a couple of kids. This is going nowhere. I'm going back to Raytheon. Now this is what we have in, okay, that's Bill Gates. So now this is what we see when I go into my hotel room. That's a phone? I mean, it's a phone that's so hard to use, they have to put labels on to use the phone, push line 1 or 2. Well, if I have to push one, why don't you make one of them always pushed? At least then it would work always. Why do I have to make that choice? And what are all these little pictograms with what happens if I wanted to dial 911, or as I heard Alec Baldwin the other day on TV say, call 912, call 912. And his assistant said, 912, what's 912? He says, it's 911 for rich people. But should you like this kind of technology, don't worry. You can get it for your home. It's really, really nice, simple to use. This is just an example of UI interface, just run amok. We do it because we can, not because it's any good. But bad UI comes in other flavors too. Sometimes we give information that you don't need, and that's annoying to me. It's like, I get it, I get it. Insert clasp into metal buckle. Okay, been there. So sometimes we get messages that are redundant. This is one of my favorites. Oh, okay. Oh, but does that mean but this is so funny because it's ambiguous. Does it mean that this switch will make it go up and this one will make it go down? It's like if you took the arrows away, it would be clearer. You know, but sometimes, you see, the designers are not just overloading, making mistakes like this. They tease us. They make you feel like it's going to be better. Like this happened to me in Microsoft Windows just the other day. It says, Windows cannot connect to the printer. I'm like, okay. Oh, but look at this. See the details. Great. I'm going to get some details. I'll be able to fix this. Here's the details. Operation failed with error 0x0002. You know? So here you're like, okay, I'm not gonna, oh no. Not operations. If it was 003, I'd know it. Or here's one of my favorite, I use products all the time, and every once in a while I just have to grab a screen because it's just, my jaw drops. Sometimes I laugh, depends on what time of the day is. This is one of my favorite messages. Please help. Why didn't you upload any pictures? Click cancel to tell us. That makes sense, right? Cancel to tell. Don't give me a button that says, tell us why you didn't upload. Give us feedback why you didn't upload. No, click cancel to tell us. And there's no cancel button. That's why I didn't upload any pictures. Your buttons don't do what they say they're going to do. So anyway, that's kind of the state of my world, but I started to get interested in this not just as a novelty when I realized I travel a lot and every morning starts with a mystery. You know what the mystery is every morning? How do you turn the shower on? Okay, now here's a thing that the majority of us do every single day. And we haven't figured out how to tell somebody if is right going to make it warmer? Is left going to make it cold? It doesn't, you know, we got a guy on the moon, you know, it doesn't seem that hard. In fact, I'm going to tell you this about Pensacola. I saw the best shower control this morning that I've ever seen. I knew it was right to get it hot and left it cold. It was a beautiful shower experience. But this last shower I couldn't believe it. They stenciled instructions on how to use the shower. Somewhere don't you think somebody's going, you know, I don't know, you're gonna be sitting there sopping wet without your reading glasses go, ow, ow. And what a way to start your day, you know, with this, figuring out a shower. And a shower has a characteristic we're going to talk about more, too. It's called high latency. In other words, when you try it, you turn it to the right, you have to wait. Now, how long do you have to wait? Is it 5 seconds? 10 seconds? 15 seconds? Then you go the other way and it still doesn't get hot. And you're like, well, maybe I didn't wait long enough for the first one. What? I mean, it's not about computers. I mean, what's up with that? This is a faucet. What was wrong with one that's labeled H and one that's labeled C, and you turn them and it mixes and you're fine? Anyway, so then I decided, all right, the world's gotten bad here. I'm going to start a project. Oh, I'm doing the shower faucets again. So I didn't mean to do that. I had my wild gesticulations. I did something. Then I decided, I travel a lot. I'm going to do, every time I get into a rental car, it has the wrong time. I'm going to set the time of any rental car, of every rental car I go into. Okay, it's just going to be a mission, because I'm going to figure out how to do it. Can't use the manual. Little entertainment. And there's a lot of different ways to set the time in a rental car, as I have found out. But for the most part, it can be done. It can be done. I don't have a college degree, but even without one, and maybe even with one, it can be done. So I set my sights higher. I said, I'm going to tackle the great frontier. I'm going to go to the clock radios that are in the hotel. And I refuse to look at any. A lot of these have got stickers on the side that tell you how to use them. So I'm not going to look at those. I managed to get every one of those right until July 8th, 2011, New York City, the Grand Hyatt Hotel. I met the Geneva 300D. I had met my match. The Geneva 300D is a beautiful looking device. It can hold your iPod. You may notice that it only has one vaguely visible display that says iPod here. There are occasions when you want to know the time, even when you're playing your iPod. But we'll leave that behind. When the iPod was removed, it actually did show the time. It just was over an hour and a half wrong. I took a look at it. I couldn't even find any buttons on the device. Sure enough, this is a beautiful European design, and all the buttons are hidden, carefully hidden. So the whole thing is like a, like Tutankhamun's tomb with secret codes and things. Okay, but I'm going to figure this out. I'm waving my hands over, just trying to get that time right. I gave up the first day, so you know what it did? The next morning, 4 a.m., it woke me up. And not only me, my family. We're up at 4 a.m. Okay, all right, Geneva 300D, I give up. I'm going to look at the instructions that are pasted to your side. So I look at these instructions, I follow them to the letter. I'm very good at following instructions. And they don't work. Now I'm really like, all bets are off. I'm going to my court of last resort of going to the internet. I'm going to Google the user's manual for this thing. Okay? And there it is. And of course, this, the same experience. It's going to kill you if you do it wrong. You set that time wrong. If you're not prepared for it and you've been accepted a license agreement, we're quite likely to sue you and your heirs and the signees and so forth. So I find this page, and I'm looking around. I'm looking in the index, set the time. Can't find it anywhere. Can't find it anywhere. But I'm in PDF Reader, so I can search by word. So I can search through the user manual and find out setting the time. I find it. Here it is. Here are the words. How to verify that the remote control works. Adjust the clock. Press the key on the remote. You can't set the time without a remote control. Now I want to ask you, what kind of person in Hyatt buys a radio for their hotel rooms that requires a remote to set the time? Don't you think you're never going to have a power failure? You're not going to lose remotes. Those things aren't going to run out of batteries. You think your maids are going to be able to set the time? It's impossible. So that was my match. But based on these instructions, I realized the time was unsettable. It was an unsolvable problem unless I were to purchase a remote somehow. So I just unplugged the thing. But that's not the end of the story, because a week later in the mail, I was fortunate enough to get a survey from Hyatt asking me about my experience. Of course, first it wants to know what language I speak. Well, he sent me the email in English. You probably should know. Then it wants to know if I stayed at the Hyatt in New York. It wants my access code, because this is like my bank account. This is my deepest secrets I'm giving you. Then it wants to know if I stayed at the New York Hyatt. Yeah, that's why you're sending me the survey, right? And so it wants to know where I had my afternoon snack, how often I use these restaurants. Was it at the Hyatt New York? Was I satisfied? Sometimes satisfied. If I answer anything not somewhat satisfied, it says, why weren't you completely satisfied? I want you to tell me that. On each of these restaurants, what did you do? Did you care about the quality of your stay? What about the safety and softness of the cushions? And finally, I'm skipping. I want to get to the point where it says, can you tell me something more, anything about your stay that we'd like you to know? That's the only thing I want to do. I'm so pissed off now. No, you can't. You got to answer every question. I mean, this is the worse than the DMV. I have one question. No, you don't. It's. No, you don't. You've got to go fill out form triple. And then they're trying to get questions. At this point, I'm like Hyatt Super Poobah Platinum Gold level guy, And I'm thinking about reasons not to stay at this hotel again. So I fired Hyatt. Or I didn't actually. So anyway, that's a stupid sort of experience of just a really bad, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. I know we're going to run out of time, but I'm going to move quickly. But the issue is, it's not just about the experience you have with a device. You're experiencing the brand. You're experiencing the Hyatt brand, and every touch point of that brand with you as a consumer ought to feel consistent. It ought to have high quality, from the time being set correctly to respecting your clean room, etc. To the survey. Everything should correlate. It didn't. But I also don't want to place all the blame. We do have things have happened very rapidly, so they have outpaced some of our ability. I mean, some of you may have remembered receiving keyboards that didn't have the any key on them. Did this happen to anybody? Okay. It happened to a lot of people. A lot of people didn't get the any key, and therefore Compaq had to have a question that says, when we say hit the any key, we mean hit any key. So we're really talking apples and oranges here. It's like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We're really in trouble. How about this? AOL sent out like 1 billion of these discs. You remember getting these in the mail all the time? You know what the #1 question for AOL support is when they called to AOL support to get this working? Which side? Do you have a computer? They're putting it into their CD player. I mean, look, you get 1,000 hours free. If you just get that, I'm getting 1,000 hours of music free. It's a CD. I've never seen a CD-ROM. I can't tell the difference. This is Platinum Premiere. It must be great music. So it's simple little things. It's not connecting with the mindset of the person you're trying to communicate with. Putting yourself in their shoes, understanding their perspective, and communicating in their language. You're communicating in your language, and then you feel like insulted when you don't understand. You need a computer. Why should they understand they need a computer? I haven't heard of America Online. I don't blame them. So moving to the problem at hand, this is my actual drawer at home. I will say though that I only have one remote now. These are all the ones that I no longer use because I have consolidated in one place. But it is not this remote, because this remote is the work of the devil. This remote, if you ask it to do something, it has to know what things you've already done. So you can't just say turn on the TV, because if the TV's already on, it's going to turn it off. Okay? So as a result, after buying this gazillion-dollar maintenance, now I've figured this out. I don't use that remote. I can hardly look at it, but I've been through my share of universal remotes, and I've got one that works. It's called Harmony. It takes years to set up, but once it works, it's great. So people with lots of money this is the instructions for how to turn on their TV. Maybe that's too long. We can give you a little cheat sheet here. That might work. But the bottom line is craziness. Is this really progress? 1980, microwave. You turn the knob, you press it on. What's this? More, less. Yes, I want more. I want more of everything. Okay, so the underlying principle, now this is the nub of the first part of this presentation. Is the reason this has all happened, basically the explosion of technology, we do this because we can. So we do everything because we can. So we end up with very complicated interfaces that do lots of things that people don't want to do, and oftentimes hide the things that people do want to do. And the best quote, going back ways, that nothing about user interface design is this one that I found. It's Mark Twain saying, "I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead." Okay? And my translation of that is, I didn't have time to figure out what you really wanted, so I gave you everything. And the art of design is not so much designing what to put in as it is making the painful decisions about what to leave out. And there's no one that has said this any better, and that this is the only thing if you're designing an experience, not even a product, but an experience, any experience. This is the fundamental, this never goes away. It was said by Alan Kay, who was at Xerox Palo Alto Research Center doing groundbreaking work on user interfaces 30 years ago. And this is it. In a nutshell, this is it. Simple things should be simple. Complex things should be possible. If you follow that rule, you can't go wrong. Okay, it makes the routine, the things that you're doing all the time, it makes them simple and obvious. If there are complex things, we don't want to obfuscate them, but we don't want to clutter them with you. You're not always doing crazy things every day. Every once in a year you may need to do this feature. That doesn't need to be as obvious as the other ones, and it can require a little poking around. That's okay, but make sure that things that people do frequently are easy to do. So we did a little little analysis project for for NASA. As Ken says, I do work for NASA with Ken. So we took a look at the space shuttle user interface. I decided it's too complex. And there's a lot of things here happening at once. So I decided to redesign the space shuttle using this principle: routine, simple, complex, possible. And we came up with this design. Now, what I like about this is not only, as you can see, it's a lot more accessible to the layperson, but you got room for a clock analog, by the way, and an 8-track player. And of course, you can press the other shuttle pilots with your fuzzy dice. Unfortunately, not only do all designers think like me, most of them start off, we feel from the outside, they start off thinking like Rube Goldberg, who was very good at making simple things complex. Many of you will remember his work. And his descendants worked for Microsoft. Here are some examples of their groundbreaking products. The first portable computer. And as we know, the groundbreaking invention of the first laser printer. But I'm an equal opportunity criticizer of bad user interface. We all will remember Clippy, probably, the most loathed feature. But Apple's got its own problems here with autocorrect. Hey, I'm in D.C. Hey, lick a lawmaker for me, will you? That's what Anthony Weiner got into trouble for, isn't it? Or how about this one? How would you like this to be the first thing that you see on the ultrasound when you're going for your first ultrasound? Oh my God! My child has a pure virtual call in his plug-in container. Is that hereditary? I mean, this stuff happens. I mean, you've driven up and seen billboards that have got Windows errors on them. I used to collect them for fun, at the airports when the signs would crash and they're saying, illegal function call or something. But anyway, I'll close this part of the presentation, don't worry, there's more, with my personal my biggest kind of current frustration. It's not frustration, it's the automatic faucet. Okay? Now I ask you, whose problem were they trying to solve here? Like, did we go to bathrooms in airports for 3 years and afterwards you go, that was a pretty good experience, but I really didn't like turning the knob, If they could just do something about that. So I'm not sure whose problem they're solving here, because this has the same latency problem. You go under there, and you're like, nothing happens. Like, okay, well, let me move a little bit. Okay, nothing, okay, let me dance here a little bit. Still nothing. And you're ending up doing this kabuki theater while everybody's watching you except they know that they know the problem too, before you go off and try the other one, assuming this one's broken. How long should the kabuki dance be? They should at least tell you, if no results after 5 seconds, try somewhere else. Okay, so the second part is, how did it get this bad? So the first part is just saying, we all know how bad it is. It's crazy, these experience, and the incomprehensibility that right now, the majority of times you see a clock in a hotel room or in a rental car, it's telling the wrong time. I mean, clocks are they've been around a long time. The fact that we accept that is just outrageous. So we said, how did we get this bad? And it is true that some designers were born with this rare condition. It's a congenital condition, but it's most often found in people who choose politics for their profession. But we occasionally see it in designers, but it's the exception. Most designers are born like this. And I want to say that the baby has the world's perfect user interface. It's fail-safe. Because if it doesn't work, the baby dies. If no baby's UI works, the human race ceases to exist. So it's a pretty good UI. It may be frustrating, but to the best of its ability, it gets the right thing done. You don't get a baby with a user manual. Right? And believe it or not, you don't have that much somatic knowledge that you've been born with about how to take care of babies. I mean, they know how to breathe. You know how to breathe. But it's kind of a trial and error, and the stakes are really high, and it works. If it doesn't work, we have problems. It's the old joke that if your parents didn't have children, you probably won't either. Now, as this child grows older, the user interface becomes increasingly complex, particularly during adolescence. You see we have the man up at the top with the on-off switch and the woman at the bottom. And I wish this came with a user's manual, speaking as a man. But my point is, these are generally good people, well-meaning, and good people can build products. That's something you have to understand. In the next part, we're going to talk about how good people come to build bad products. Okay? Let me take you on this road. So here's a good product. The iPod, what came out generally accepted to be a great product. Here's a little spoof of the iPod packaging, as if Microsoft were to redesign the iPod packaging. Okay, so just take a look at what happens here. You may have seen, I guess I got to, it starts off nice and clean with a clean box. The Microsoft puts a logo on it. Up the top, the Human Ear Edition. We got offers, we got features, we got an upgrade offer. We've got features on the side. We've got, this is an empty box, don't use it. Now we go move to the side. No, it should be in color, it needs to be warmer. We need that, that's wasted space. Let's put some stuff there. Let's put all of the features we need. We can tell it what it works with, define what 5 gigabytes really means, and you end up with a box where you can't even see the device anymore. And lest you think I am criticizing Microsoft, that presentation was done by the design team at Microsoft. Okay? They are showing how frustrated they are to live in an organization that doesn't let them be designers. So they're good people, they're good designers. That's a funny video, it's on YouTube, and I've condensed it down just into the slides. But that's not somebody making fun of Microsoft. That's Microsoft designers in frustration saying, why don't you just let us design instead of polluting it with all this marketing? The purity of the experience is destroyed. Now we're, look, you can't even see the product. These circle stickers are called by designers, packaging designers, they're called violators because they violate the design. Now there's only one way that this happens, and it's called groupthink, a term, of course, that George Orwell invented. And groupthink is defined as being the process of coming up with a decision so stupid that no one person could make it alone. Now, this generally happens after someone says, let's get together to make a decision. And the exquisitely engineered place where this process occurs is called a meeting. And the importance of meetings is something that every company's Department of Progress Prevention emphasizes relentlessly. So let's say let's have a meeting to design that horse. Well, you know what comes out of a committee that designs a horse? Out comes a camel. But here's the thing, the dynamic you have to understand is everybody in that meeting got what they want. It was a process of compromise. So the mistake was believing we're getting together with people of different interests, and we're going to give somebody everybody so we can leave the room and all feel good. And that's the mistake they made, that consensus builds terrible products, and democracy is even worse. And building a product organization that creates greatness and insanely great stuff, as Steve Jobs called it, requires a dictatorship, preferably a benevolent dictatorship, but not necessarily. So what defines a good experience? The product has to answer the question, can I do something with this product? How do I do something with this product? And how do I know if I got it right? So how do I know if I got it right? Those are the 3 things that you look for. For example, here's one of my favorite clock radios. Where's the on switch? Sony in their infinite wisdom said, you know what? This on switch thing is overrated. We're just going to let them press CD radio, or CD radio, I guess, is what turns it on. How do you turn it off? I mean, it's like, yeah, that on switch, we think that's really confusing customers, Let's get rid of it. So a product that doesn't make you aware of what it can do, like be turned on, is kind of deficient. Sometimes products tease you and say, you think you know what the product does, and then you're surprised when you find out it looks like something, but it's really something else. Those are cork coasters made to look like bread. Okay, so now I'm going to get a little bit technical. I'll move quickly through this, but I'll show you and this is serious now, so don't laugh at this part. Okay? And this is not an actual product that I'm going to be demonstrating because there's some proprietary stuff in there. But this is what I call a usability scorecard. And it's just what we talked about before. I guess I could do this with it'll make me feel so professorial, though. I don't know. Anyway, I'll just point. So here are features that are used rarely. Here are features that are used often. Here are the number of steps required to access that feature. if you make features that are used often difficult to access, and features that are used rarely to be easy to access, you've done exactly the wrong thing, right? So this is the wrong slope of this graph. Things that you want to use often need to be down here. Now, if you can make things that are used seldom easy to use and easy to access too, without cluttering up the ability to find the things that use often, go for it. But in general, you see the slope of the line like this, you're talking about a bad design or one that could be improved. You see a slope of a line like this, you're talking about one that's been designed. And this will work on a light switch. It'll work on a radio. It'll work on almost anything that you have to interface with. What do you want to do frequently, and how difficult is it to do? Interestingly, you can then look at the regression of that point space over time for a particular user. And what you are looking at is you look at the way that shape changes over time, is you're looking at really the learning curve for the product. It's not just a term of art. It's actually like a learning curve for easy to use features and learning curve for hard to use features. So you have a way of analytically estimating the difficulty of using a product before you invest the time to create it based on just the way that it's designed. Okay, so that's a hard product. And Microsoft Outlook is the worst offender in my world here, because with a single click, not only can I compose a message, but I can remove a single errant click. I can remove a result from my columns of items in the results. If you use Microsoft Outlook, you might know what I'm telling. Or I can move a folder somewhere where it appears to be invisible. And I used to, when my dad was alive, and in his 60s, you know, every week he'd call up and said, "Yep, date received's gone again." I'm like, okay. I dial into his computer and I fix it and put it back together. But the other terrible thing about exposing at that level is there's no undo. Like the steps you have to do to undo the thing you did, it's not like just undo it. It's like, no, I've done something now, and I'm lost. But I can't just walk back out the door I came in. I have to find the other secret passage right now. Some very, very gross design decisions that they were made 30 years ago. And if we had longer time, we could talk about why bad decisions stick. And there's some very good examples of why bad decisions and bad designs stick, because once you've invested the time, the best example is the keyboard. We all know this keyboard was designed to be slow and hard to use. There are apparently better keyboards, but we won't use them because we have learned this one, thank you very much. And that's the way it is with avid video editing. It was long-standing the standard in video editing. It continues today with Microsoft products or Photoshop for that matter. And you won't get the real tipping point of conversion to other easier use solutions until you get a dramatic order of magnitude improvement, like in cost performance. So for Avid occurred when you had massive improvements in productivity, but also at 1/10 of the cost of the Avid solution. Avid ended up buying Pinnacle as a result to compete. Okay, we're going to have to move fast now, because Ken runs the tightest ship that I've ever been a part of. Okay, so let's start with the first user interface ever. Bing, click. You click the button, turns on. Great. The input has 2 states. The light bulb has 2 states. No manual necessary. Now, we talked about latency before. Really, first we talked about, can it do what I want? So how obvious is it that I can do the thing I want? Then how do I do what I want? What are the steps I need to go through? How simple is that? And we talked way about analyzing that. Now let's look at, how do I know I did the right thing? So the prototypical example is the light bulb. If I click the switch for the light bulb turns on, right? Of course. Now what happens if I click the switch for the light bulb and it may or may not turn on? Or it probably will turn on, but it's going to turn on after an indeterminate amount of time. Okay? So would you be tempted to say, well, I think I'll press that button again because maybe it didn't hear me the first time, so let me try again? If somebody else walked up to you in the dark and looked at the button and saw the light was off, you think they would walk over and press it too just to make sure it had been pressed? Can you imagine how stupid it would be to build a device like that? Ladies and gentlemen, meet the crosswalk button. There could be not a simpler device which provides some feedback, and now some do. But couldn't you just tell me you heard me and you'll get around to me when you can? You know, how many times do you walk in and you're like, did he press? You know? It happens. It also happens with elevators. You press the elevator to go down, and the elevator's like, I'm almost there. I won't turn the light on. You know, I won't turn the light. I'm like, press it there. press it. Why isn't the light turn on? Ding, there it is. Oh, I was so close. I didn't think you'd want to know I would be here so soon. But, yes, I wanted to know. I didn't want to punch my finger. I mean, really simple stuff makes a big difference in terms of the way that you feel about using the product. Okay, but I want to explain now, there's those examples, but I want to say what the enormous problem that we have. And listen to this, listen to this, listen to this. So these are the total computers sold to date. It starts in 1977 because before then there were so few it doesn't even make the graph mode. It would just be a violent spike to the right. So 2 billion computers in use today, minimum. And the total computing power on the planet estimated at the end of 2007 to be 6.4 times 10 to the 18th MIPS. MIPS is millions of instructions per second. Okay? Now, by a strange coincidence, and this is true, this is not a joke, by strange coincidence, 6.4 by 10 to the 18th is very, very close to the number of nerve impulses that your brain can act upon and transmit in 1 second. So it's very interesting that even after all this evolution, in our own very weird way, we have a computing device that's as complex as all of the world's computers put together. Doesn't mean you have the same memory, but it means that this is capable of doing some pretty amazing things. Okay, so then I said, okay, we got all those computers, we got all this MIPS. What is the MIPS over time? And I didn't even bother to make this look nice because in the 40s we got one computer that has this many MIPS. In the 70s, we got 50,000 computers of one MIPS. So nothing happens to the mid-90s. So when we only used one computer, we used it like this. We sat in a room. We took a week-long course how to learn it because our job depended on it. And this is the Sabre system. We made reservations for people who wanted to travel on airlines. Oh, now I've lost my train of thought. I can't do anything. No, just kidding. So when we only had to learn one computer, we can invest a lot of time in because we only dealt with one computer. For most people, the first computer they ever used was the ATM, right? And that was a revolutionary thing. Read instructions off of a screen that changes like a TV, and it knows what I'm doing with this screen. That was a big learning curve. This is where I get to tell you about, even now today, very, very quickly, I have a friend with a 9-year-old daughter. She's starting a bank account. She's taking her $38 to the ATM to deposit it. And with deference to our sponsors, it was not a Bank of America ATM. And she puts the $38 in there, counts it. They go to the screen, error. Please call 1-800 blah, 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 blah. True story, this happened last week. This 9-year-old girl, the life lesson is teaching mode. We're going to teach you where it's safe to put your money, honey. They go into the bank teller and said, my daughter, 9 years old, $38, it's in the machine, I don't know how to get it, what's happening? What does the bank teller says? Oh, that's a different group that runs the ATM. You got to call them up. You got to wait for them to audit the cash drawer. It'll take 2 or 3 days. So she gets home. Mommy says, how did it go? Well, do they have your money? I don't know, and they don't know. So it's not. This is run amok. But the real inflection one was the point that Ken stole from me, which is the introduction of the VCR. This is the first device that we had to program, and we programmed them. It was the first device that you'd say, next Thursday from 10 to 11, I want you to record for half an hour. Now, raise your hand if you ever actually programmed your VCR. Technical audience here. I would estimate less than 10%. Okay, most people, we used to call them the flashing 12 people. He says, oh, he's a flashing 12 person. Okay, so I'll make my next point, which is that I'm going to talk about Jobs and Edison. And we think of Jobs as a great designer of products, or we think of Edison as a great inventor, but really they're doing something much rarer. They are valuing great design and valuing great genius and creating a culture that supports and nurtures that. It's much, much harder. Anybody can be a great designer. Put Jobs in front of a piece of paper, I don't know what he could sketch out. But he knows how to see good design and reward it and follow it through with a passionate conviction of what it ought to be, even in the face of external influences and internal voices that want to change it for other reasons. When asked about how much user input went into the creation of the iPad, the potentially apocryphal story, depending on who you listen to, was that he said, 0. It's not customers' jobs to know what they want. And that's really a paraphrase of Henry Ford that said, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. So sometimes the customer doesn't have the vocabulary to even express what they want or the imagination to know what is possible. and really great design marries an understanding of what people would want with what technology is possible. It is not this like, we're going to define what people want, and then you technologists, you go figure out how to build it. It's demand pull and technology push, and having somebody smart enough to know where those two things meet, and then follow that vision through relentlessly as a czar. And Steve is a czar. I mean, what I mean, he's a brutal dictator. You know, a guy like me, I never worked for him, but a guy like me was rehearsing for the Apple show, the big Apple Macworld show, and literally Steve said to him, "Boy, I sure hope you're good at your real job, because you suck at this." Okay, a brief story of the MP3 player to illustrate what Steve went through with it. Okay. This to the right, nobody knows what that is. It's the world's first hard disk-based MP3 player. I, of course, have one. Okay, had 2 gigabytes, cost about $1,000. But that was the outlier. Then there was some innovation there. It was an you know who designed this compact computer? You know what they did? No market for that thing. We licensed the manufacturing rights to Hango Electronics in Korea, and we forget about it. Because all that was happening in the MP3 player space where players were getting smaller, cheaper, and holding more. The only innovation that remained was just make that device smaller and cheaper and make it hold more. Now, that's pretty short-sighted, but the game was over. If you ask anybody in the year 2000, you know, oh, I want to get into the MP3 player market, you're crazy. Okay, and you know where you get with the smaller, cheaper, faster, you get really nice devices that look like this. You may recall the movie Zoolander, so device manufacturers consider the MP3 player to be a device which plays music, whereas Steve came along and said, no, iPod is an experience which allows you to discover, acquire, enjoy, and share your music. Those are my words, but that's the context. And what I've advised companies that I consult for is the business you're in is you're building experiences, you're not building devices. So how well has this strategy worked? If you look at the Stripe, you can say, well, you know, Microsoft still, look, they own the lion's share of this, Laura. You know, this is maybe good in theory, but Microsoft still dominates. Well, in fact, as you know, the market capitalization of Apple is greater than Microsoft now, even though Microsoft rescued that company from going bankrupt with a $300 million investment, whatever it was, 20 years ago, because they didn't want them to go bankrupt because it made it look bad for antitrust reasons. But if you look at how Apple has turned that around, if you don't think of it as a Windows versus Mac issue, and you consider what has happened with the mobile devices, for the first time in 2011, the PC, smartphone, and OS market share will cross over. Microsoft has lost the predominant position. Who cares what operating system it runs? I don't even know anymore. It's running, if you talk to Google, it's running Chrome. That's their operating system. In the future, you say, what operating system? Some people will say, I'm running Facebook. That's their operating system. It's true. True. It sounds silly now, but believe me, Google is about an operating system. You see the Chrome OS, etc. Now, I can only talk very quickly here now because I'm cutting into Q&A time. But I want to say why these things are different. Because you ought to think that the best products could compete in a fair and open market, and the best ones would survive, and the worst ones would drop off. And that process of natural selection in the marketplace is true, but the things that are being selected for is not product quality or user experience. What is being selected for, because it is not an unbiased ecosystem. The ecosystem is biased by things like ego, the ego of the people building this. Ah, my friend got to use the new RISC 5370 processor. My next product is going to use the 5380. Or my wife wants this feature. I'm going to do this to make her happy. Or we can't build that because if we do, we're going to compete with this competitor, and the government says we're getting too big. They won't like that. Or patent protection, which is another form of innovation stifling, depending on how you look at it, particularly in the software world. Or financial performance. Look, Jim, you got to ship that product this quarter because otherwise we're going to get creamed in the market. That has nothing to do with customer happiness. So there's other factors that influence, because the organism which is trying to survive is either the company trying to survive in its company ecosystem, which it may act in its short-term interest but in the long-term detriment of its customers, or it may be the employee trying to survive in the company ecosystem, and that's how they make their decisions. I can make a bad decision, but I won't get fired for it if I can make no decision, I won't get fired for it. If I make a bad decision, I might get fired for it. Therefore, I will make no decision. That happens a lot. So I just wanted to, and consensus also I think is the desire for consensus to keep people happy. When I build products, I'm like, you know, I'm not here to make you happy. I'm here to make the best product we possibly can. Almost done, Ken. Don't worry. Don't get that rifle out yet. Because this part there's only like 3 slides left. So I want to point out that it can get better. And this is the part where I say, look, don't look at that. That's wrong. Take a look at this. Blank. Where are we? Okay. Here's the process of the committee that designed the wheel. Okay. In the middle, we start off with an idea that it should be round. It could be square. It could be oval. So we go through the development process. We ship it. We listen to our customers and say, oh, we got it right. So this is the way that we came in from kind of the industrial world into the computing age and say, we sit in our infinite wisdom and decide what we're going to build, and then we relentlessly follow that vision all the way till we ship. Then we ship it, and maybe there's some things will change, but you know, for now you get it in black and only black. And in an uncompetitive market, I mean, really, you know, we really didn't care what color the wheel was or what color the Model T was, because nothing else existed. So this is the story of a company that goes in a different direction and actually builds a square wheel. I could tell you the story that would take a half an hour in of itself, but suffice it to say, you start off with thinking the world wants this. Some guy comes along in the organization and says, I want this. We try to pull him back onto the straight and narrow. It starts to get so much momentum now that this guy is powerful enough, he can force it in his direction, because if he goes backwards, it's egg on his face. You know, he'll rather not ship the product than ship a product and have it fail. So now his interests are completely unaligned. They get out here and ship the product that marketplace doesn't want, and maybe if they're lucky, they have time to recover based on market feedback. The best example of this, I think, is Iridium, which Motorola started to put up a global communication system just in the beginning days of cell phones, and invested billions of dollars, because this is the thesis, was that I'm going to give you a phone. You can make a phone call from anywhere. You don't need to be near a cell tower. You make the phone call. It always works. One service provider, all for the entire universe, no roaming charges, nothing. Now, what they didn't say is the phone's going to cost $3,000. It's going to weigh 2 pounds. And it's going to cost you $5 a minute to make a phone call. Now, all of those things came up during the development, and everybody with the group thing says, yeah, 5 minutes of phone call? Yeah, I think most people would pay that. So, you know, they got to the point where they're actually going to deorbit the satellites when this is a complete failure. Motorola took, or the Iridium LLC, and through Motorola took about greater than a $2 billion write-down on it. Eventually, the DoD stepped in, chopped the prices by an order of magnitude, and off they went to become basically a provider of information or provider of telecom services in remote areas. I have one. It's good. They also built it with the prescient idea that it only needed to support 1200 baud, because who wants to transmit data anyway? Okay, so really what we see now in the iterative model is we don't see a monolithic desire or ability to understand our customer at the beginning, but a way of integrating feedback from people within the organization, and most importantly, a czar, a single person who makes decisions about what is and isn't the product. The second you design, the second you divide up the ultimate say of what the product does, like you say, you get all decisions, but you can't decide what color it is. Forget it. It's over. You have to have one person who gets to render their yay or nay. They can take the recommendation. There has to be one person. Has to be. I could tell you a lot of stories about that. I won't. And anyway, I'll summarize now saying technology has gotten us from this wonderful device that took pretty good pictures, and now we have this. Why? The only reason why is because we can. You don't want this. You're frustrated. You select something on the menu. You don't know what to do anymore. I can't find my way out of that thing. I can't take a picture. I press the button. It's like 2 seconds later, ping, I took your picture. No, that's not what I wanted. You know, oh, you're in scene mode now. What scene mode? I don't want scene mode. You know, it's crazy. Okay, so the overarching, all of this comes down to one fact, is that a company now, in order to be successful, needs to balance on top. Every time they touch the customer, whether it's when the customer buys the product, whether they use the product, whether they use the ecosystem the product is a part of for the entire holistic experience, when they touch the brand, and even when things go wrong and they contact customer service, all of those things have to say one word to the customer or one phrase. They all have to point and balance the company on that word. Now, for Apple, I'm not going to be expert on this, but for Apple it might be easy. It's easy. May not be entirely true. But notice that this system is dynamically unstable. If you get one of these things not working, that ball's going to fall off. The real genius is creating an organization that looks like this. Okay? Where the organization self-corrects to that message. It allows people, empowers people to come back on message, even when mistakes are made. Okay, last slide. People don't make bad products, companies make bad products. Because companies allow people to make decisions that make bad products. When the company's needs aren't balanced with the customer's, disaster ensued. Ship that product, I don't care, we got to do it by Tuesday. No. Every point where you touch the customer should convey a consistent message. Build experiences, not devices. Listen to the customer, but not too much. Because they may not know what they want. If we had more time, I could tell you great stories about asking customers about whether they want physical buttons or touch buttons. And depending on how old they are and what their experience is, they'll tell you different things. Democracies don't produce great products. Consensus is the enemy of excellence. That's all I have for you. I'm going to just thank the people that helped me put this together.
Lars, thank you so much for coming to Pensacola.
Thank you for having me.
And as a physician, I can tell you I've watched this interface for 30 years of seeing certain things happen. One of them was the ICD-9 codes that we've been playing with the last few years. And in the last 6 months and now coming up for January, we as physicians are all going to be faced with the ICD-10 codes, which have gone from 14,000 unnecessary codes now to 6 or 9 times that. And somebody up top is insisting that the doctor himself fill it out. Now, there's a lot of MIPS in my brain, and it's not there for that. Why don't you quit NASA and come work for the government?
For the government, wow. And fix healthcare. What would I do in the afternoon, though? I guess I could solve the Middle East problem.
What am I going to do in the afternoon?
Yeah.
Because it's ridiculous.
I agree.
Another question?
Excuse me? Oh, well, wherever the mic is. Do you take the mic to anybody and all that?
Yeah. This is AJ. That was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to Pensacola.
Thank you for having me.
I think one of the issues with technology, it can do wonderful things as a tool, but can also be, as the physician just mentioned, a huge time waster. And I think that's where we need to go. My daughter carries an iPhone 4. I don't. I want the phone call to make a phone call and take a voicemail. Unless I'm making international business deals, I don't need to have a lot of the things. So I think the simplicity is where we need to lean versus more. And I'd like to get your input on that.
Oh, absolutely. I try to provide a framework to actually measure simplicity. But the next kind of level is we have all these computing horsepower. Why don't we deploy some of it for simplicity? What I mean by that, if you press print on your computer, there could be some intelligence that said, he pressed print 15 seconds ago and nothing's come out of the printer. Let me try to figure out what's going on. Nobody's doing that now. Everything has to be in perfect alignment. So I think what we could do is redeploy, and of course with Moore's Law, this stuff it'll double in 18 months. But why don't we take the next 18 months to take the technology, to take the work off of our shoulders and make the technology more usable rather than just doing the same things faster. And that's what I would like to see. And that requires a different software system design architecture, because you're trying not only to deploy a specific straight line function for a user, but you're also trying to monitor that flow of that function and provide them with the right feedback. And it ain't clippy, about how to do what they want to do better.
Okay, one more question.
Well, you've made it very clear that we need simplicity in our electronics. And you've made the most humorous presentation of all that. But really taught us that. Why do you think people still go to places like Best Buy and Target and buy more complex electronics than the simpler ones?
I think, in general, if they had two choices, one between complex and simple, I think their choice would be simple. And in many cases, they pay more for simple. Through Bose stores, which have long produced good products that are easy to use, you're paying a higher price. You pay more for Apple because of the ease of use, which is not just Apple's brilliance as a design company, but also because of the homogeneity of their ecosystem. They build everything, so poor Microsoft has to make it work with 9,000 graphic cards. Apple doesn't. So people do pay more for things that work better. When it comes right down to consumer electronics, there aren't a lot of choices. That's why it's very important to realize, or it's interesting to realize, Apple Computer changed their name a couple years ago. They're no longer Apple Computer, they're Apple. So they've decided, and I would not be surprised to see an Apple, not Apple TV as we know it today, but Apple consumer electronics devices, because they're the only company that has really cracked the code with making this complexity usable, and they haven't done a great job. They have not done a great job, particularly on this. But iPad, iPhone, I think they've done a very good job, at least leading the way. And there's a whole bunch of interesting stories about that we don't have time to tell. But I think others are learning from them. But Apple, as the most valuable company in the U.S. right now, still has the lead.
Let's thank our speaker.
Thank you.